Ever get that feeling?
Yeah.
Like you can just tell when someone's faking a smile. Like you're really good at spotting when someone's words and their face don't match up.
Mm.
Well, you might be onto something. And in today's deep dive, we're going to explore that. We're looking at the idea that lots of autistic adults, they might be especially good at recognizing fake emotions.
Interesting.
And our guide for this whole thing is a blog post. It's from Cheap ABA. And get this, it's called The Autism Advantage, Uncovering the Ability to Recognize Fake Emotions.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a catchy title.
Right.
So this is a really cool area of research. It challenges those old ideas about autism and how autistic people understand social stuff. So instead of just struggling with, what's it called, theory of mind.
Right, like understanding what others are thinking and feeling.
Exactly. Some autistic people, they might actually be super tuned in to picking up on when someone's emotions aren't really genuine, when things are off.
So it's not that they don't understand social stuff, it's that they understand it differently.
You got it. It's almost like they've got this special filter that highlights when things don't match up. And the blog post gives some really good examples.
But like what?
Well, like being able to tell when someone's smile is totally forced, or when the language they're using is manipulative.
Uh-huh.
They might even notice those little mismatches between someone's body language and what they're saying.
That is so interesting. But how does it actually work? Like, is there something different happening in their brains?
Well, that's where systemizing comes in. And that's something autistic people are often really great at.
Systemizing.
Yeah, it's like they're really good at analyzing patterns and systems. And you can almost think of social stuff as a system, with its own rules and patterns.
So they're like social detectives or something.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for clues that don't quite add up. And research is actually starting to back this up. There was this study where they looked at brain activity in autistic and non-autistic adults while they watched videos of people showing different emotions. And guess what? The autistic people, they actually had more activity in certain brain areas.
Really?
Yeah, the areas linked to processing social information. And this was especially true when the emotions on the video, they weren't genuine.
So their brains are working overtime to crack the code.
Could be. It might explain why they're more sensitive to those little cues that other people miss.
Huh. If you're always looking for patterns when things don't fit, you'd be more likely to notice stuff that's out of the ordinary.
Yeah, exactly.
But wouldn't that be exhausting? Like imagine having to analyze every interaction all the time, looking for fakeness.
Yo, for sure. That's where we get to the double-edged sword of this whole thing. It can be a real advantage, don't get me wrong,
Right,
like,
yeah.
say, in a business deal or if you're trying to figure out if someone's lying to you. But it can also make you feel a lot more anxious and stressed out in social situations.
So it's not really a superpower. It's more like this heightened sensitivity that has its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
And the blog post talks about this a bit, right? Like the potential downsides.
It does. It says being on high alert for insincerity all the time can be super draining. And it can also make it hard to just filter stuff out, which can lead to feeling overwhelmed or like sensory overload.
And I bet it makes it harder to trust people, to form close relationships, if you're always wondering if they're being real with you.
That's a big one, yeah. And that's something we'll look at more in the next part of this deep dive. It's not just about recognizing when emotions are fake. It's about understanding how that affects the way we see the world and how we relate to other people.
It's like we can't escape the social stuff, right?
Yeah.
So fascinating, though.
Yeah.
But also, man, so complicated. Right before we jumped into part 2, we were saying that if you're good at recognizing fake emotions, it can make it harder to trust people.
Yeah.
And that makes me think, it brings up that whole question of authenticity.
Right.
And the blog post mentions it a little, but doesn't really go into it too much.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Because if you're always noticing those little signs that someone isn't being genuine, I feel like it would make you question, like, ALL social interaction. It's
right.
like, is everyone always just putting on an act? Like, how do we even know what's real anymore? Where's the line between, like, being polite and being totally fake?
Oh, man, that is the question, isn't it? Philosophers have been trying to figure that out forever.
Right.
But I think it's especially important for autistic people to think about because they might understand social cues in a much more literal way.
So how do we deal with this? Because we can't just, like, stop talking to people altogether, can we?
Absolutely not. And it's important to remember that not all masking is bad. Like, sometimes people mask to protect themselves or even to be considerate of other people.
You mean, like,
Yeah, think about it. Have you ever, like, put on a smile when you were feeling super down,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
just so you wouldn't worry everyone around you?
Totally. I've
Yeah.
done that especially at work. It's like putting on a uniform. But how do we know when it's okay and when it becomes a problem?
I think that's where self-awareness comes in. And empathy, too. Just because you can tell someone is masking, it doesn't mean they're trying to hurt you or that they're lying.
Right.
They might just be trying to deal with a tough situation or trying to fit in, with those social expectations that can be so uncomfortable.
So we should try to give people the benefit of the doubt and try to understand why they're acting the way they are.
Exactly. And that's where the whole autism advantage thing can actually be really helpful. Because if you're good at picking up on those little cues,
Hmm.
you might also be better at noticing those real moments of connection, those times when people are actually being vulnerable with each other.
Like maybe you can tell that someone's masking because they're shy or anxious. And,
Yeah.
and that helps you be more understanding and compassionate towards them.
Exactly. You're looking past the surface, past the performance, and you're seeing the actual person. And that's something we can all learn from.
This makes me think about something else the blog post talked about. The idea that being able to spot fake emotions could be really helpful in situations where someone might be trying to, manipulate you or trick you.
That is a super interesting point, and I think it's worth exploring. Because if you're good at picking up on those little signs that things aren't adding up,
Yeah.
you might be better at seeing red flags when you're in a risky situation.
So like if someone's words and their actions don't match, or if you just get that feeling that something isn't right, you're
Exactly.
more likely to trust your gut.
Yep. And that awareness can be super important. It can help protect you from people who might want to take advantage of you.
So it's not just about handling everyday conversations. It's also about having that extra layer of protection when things could be dangerous.
You got it. And that's a really important thing to highlight because it changes how we see this whole ability.
Right.
It shows how it can actually be empowering.
It's like instead of focusing on the challenges, we can see the good stuff. It's a much more positive way to look at it.
It is, and it shows how important it is to understand and celebrate neurodiversity. What might seem like a weakness in one situation could be a strength in another.
That is such a powerful message. But how do we put all of this into practice? Like, how can we use what we've learned about recognizing fake emotions to improve our lives and our relationships?
Well, a good place to start is with mindfulness. Just being in the moment and paying attention to how you're feeling.
Okay.
That can help you tell the difference between genuine emotions and fake ones.
And I remember the blog post mentioned stuff like doing deep breathing exercises and talking to a therapist or joining a support group.
Those are all great ideas. I'd also say that keeping a journal can be really helpful. It can help you understand your experiences and see patterns in your own behavior.
It's like you're making your own map for how to handle the social world.
Exactly. And remember, there's no one right way to do this. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about figuring out what helps you feel more confident and comfortable when you're around other people.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We talk about the science behind recognizing fake emotions, and we explored the pros and cons. But I think what's really cool is how all of this can change the way we see ourselves and how we interact with everyone else.
It's like we're looking at the world through a whole new lens, right?
Yeah.
You start noticing all those subtle ways people present themselves, the masks they wear, all those unwritten rules of social interaction.
It makes you realize that everyone is putting on some kind of performance, even if they don't mean to.
And that can be a little unnerving, especially if you really value authenticity, if you really crave genuine connection. It might even make you start questioning how sincere the people around you are,
Right, yeah.
or even doubt your own ability to be truly open and vulnerable.
And that's where it gets tough. Because you don't want to become super cynical and distrust everyone, but you also don't want to be naive and get taken advantage of. How do we find that balance?
It is tricky. But I think the key is remembering that recognizing fake emotions isn't about judging people. It's not about putting them into boxes labeled good or bad. It's about understanding human behavior on a deeper level.
So it's not about assuming everyone's out to get us.
Right.
It's about realizing that people have their reasons for hiding their true feelings, and those reasons aren't always bad.
Exactly. Sometimes it's about protecting themselves, sometimes it's about fitting in, and sometimes they're just trying to spare someone else's feelings.
It's like everyone's got their own stuff going on, their own fears and insecurities, and that comes out in how they interact with the world.
And that's where empathy is so important. The more we get how complex human emotions are, the more compassion we can have for ourselves and for others.
So instead of getting hung up on fake versus real,
Uh,
We can start to see the nuances, all those layers of meaning behind what people do, and we can treat each other with more understanding.
Absolutely. And I think that's where recognizing fake emotions can really make a difference. Because it's not just about keeping ourselves safe, it's about making the world a kinder, more authentic place.
It's about building real connections, even though we know those connections can be messy and imperfect.
Exactly. And that's okay, because real closeness comes from accepting each other, all our flaws and everything.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. Imagine a world where being vulnerable is more important than being perfect, where we celebrate our differences instead of trying to fit in, where real connection matters more than just being polite. What would that world look like, and what can each of us do to create it?
That is a beautiful vision. And I think it all starts with us. By being our true selves, by approaching others with curiosity and kindness, we can make a difference that goes way beyond just ourselves.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of recognizing fake emotions. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into all the things that make us human.